come to you today with another wrap up. I know that these have been sort of unreliably published for the last few months because I decided, why do a monthly wrap up when I can do wrap ups whenever I want? Next year I'm going to be starting the system where I do wrap-ups like every 5 or 10 books, and that way you're not flooded with monthly wrap-ups because I don't want to have to constrict myself to only posting videos at the end of a month. Anyway, I've read 14 books since we last talked, which was at like the middle-ish end of August, so I'm just going to tell you about the other ones that I've read since then. Can you not? I have friends visiting.
We bought you a parfait.
I didn't know
Are you
you
for
were
real?
vlogging.
Yeah, here you go. Oh, we walked up the stairs.
I'm just gonna talk about books for like 10 minutes. I don't care if y'all stay. The first book that I read since we last talked was at the end of August, and it was Blue is the Warmest Color by Julie Marrow. This is a graphic novel that's originally in French and it was translated to English. There's a Netflix, or it used to be on Netflix, it has a movie, and that's really popular. And this is a graphic novel that follows two girls and their lesbian relationship, and I thought it was so beautiful. I know there's controversy about the movies. People were tweeting me and saying like the director in the movie was like really intense and forcing the girls to do stuff that was really weird, but the book by itself, I thought it was told so well. It was really beautiful. It was so tragic. I don't have it to show you, so I can't show you the art style in it, but that was so wonderful. And it's probably my new favorite graphic novel, even though Blankets by Craig Thompson has held that position for like a year and a half now. This is my new favorite graphic novel. It was beautiful. I gave that book 5 stars and I highly recommend it. The next book I read is a book of poetry, which is Ariel by Sylvia Plath. I've read Sylvia Plath's other book, The Bell Jar, before, and I enjoyed it. I think I gave it like 4.5 stars. It was pretty, but I wasn't like wowed by it. Honestly, this book was not memorable for me. I gave it 2 stars. It was not good. I mean, I'm very picky about poetry. I'm starting to realize I have to have a poem that makes sense, but it's also good, but it's also personal and emotional, but it's like understandable. There's a very like narrow gap of poetry that I really enjoy, and this was just really hard to understand. Someone on Goodreads was reviewing it saying it's like too personal. She puts things in her own words that don't really make sense to other people. So it's an inside joke with herself and none of us can decode what she's trying to say, and I felt very much like that. I could tell that she had really pretty writing. I just had no clue what she was trying to say. I just feel dumb every time I read poetry because I constantly think that this seems pretty, but I have no clue what it's telling me. So I just couldn't click with this collection of poetry. I gave it 2 stars. Maybe there's people that like it more than me, but also I've heard that there's controversy around this collection, that some of it was changed after she died, and then they republished one that wasn't as edited. I have no clue which version I had, so maybe if I had a different version I might have enjoyed it more. No idea, but wasn't a fan. The next book I read was also a poetry collection. This one was Crush by Richard Seiken. This book is poems written by a gay man, so a lot of it has male imagery and it's love poems about gays. I love it, obviously. I did like this one a lot more. It was way more personal and emotional and you can actually understand it. This type of poetry I really like because it's, I don't want to say it's more modern so it's easier to understand, but it definitely has better references that I can click with. I sympathized with it more just because I could understand it. And obviously I'm not a gay man, but like I could put myself in the shoes of the author and it was really pretty to read and I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. The next book I read was a graphic novel. It was the 6th volume of Saga by Brian K. Vaughan. This series is just crazy. I'm sure if you're in the graphic novel world you have at least heard of it. It's a sci-fi series that follows 2 people who are having like an interracial relationship, and the 2 species like live on different planets and there's intergalactic war, and by the 6th volume just everything has hit the fan and I don't even know what's going on anymore. I think the series is really entertaining and I love the art style. I love the characters. I think Marco is really hot. I love these books and I think I could love them even more if I read them consecutively, but since I keep having to buy them after like however many months have gone by since the last one was out, I forget pretty much everything that happens. So whenever I pick up the next one I'm just like thrust back into the world not really knowing what's going on. Regardless, I still gave this book 4.5 stars, but once again I feel like if I could reread the entire series back to back I would give them all 5 stars. They're just so much fun. They're really inclusive and diverse, even though like diverse in that world means like there's purple and green characters and all sorts of sexualities. It's just really wonderful and funny and I highly recommend them, even though they are very inappropriate. The next book I read I was sent by Penguin Teen for review, and it was The Reader by Tracy Chee. This book follows a girl who lives in a world where reading is outlawed and unheard of, so like literally books don't exist. But this is a just fantasy book about her doing that. It's been so long since I've read it. I'm like, what is, who? I just wasn't a fan of this book. It was really, really long-winded. I found myself getting bored during it. So I picked up the audiobook hoping that would be better. Even then I was bored. I'm just not a fan of books with pirates or any sort of like people being on ships. I'm not a fan of that, so I wasn't a fan of this book, but once again, if you like that, go for it. That's probably gonna be your thing, but since it's not my thing, I just was bored by it, and it's not a type of world that I enjoy reading about, so I gave it 2 stars. I do think the writing was pretty, and I did like the characters. I just wasn't wowed by this book, and it took a lot for me to even get through it because I was suffering, skipping chapters. The next book that I read is another poetry. Why am I reading so much poetry? I don't even like poetry that much, but this one was Behind Closed Doors by Melinda. How dare you? Do I even have people in my room still? Did the ghost just sneeze? So this was sent to me by Melinda Schlegel. I want to make that German automatically, but it's probably not. I have a lot of criticisms. I don't think this collection was done very well. I think it's self-published. I don't want to automatically cast a judgment on self-published books, but this could have gone through a lot of editing. I feel like there should have been some sort of formatting. I thought this was gonna be like a book about her personal life and like her experiences in poetry form, but like some of the poems were about like pedophilia and murder, and I was like, okay, not what I was expecting. So I feel just some sort of warning would have been nice about that. It could use some work. So I gave this book 2 stars, even though some of the passages were pretty. Yeah, 2 stars. The next book I read was An Arc of Gemina by J. Kaufman and Amy Kaufman. This book is the second book in the Illuminae series. I have Illuminae! I can show you it! Shout out to April who just got me this copy of Illuminae. Illuminae is an amazing book series, even though there's only this one and the sequel out. It's a sci-fi series, and I think if you've ever heard me say a sci-fi book is good, that means you know it's great, because I hate sci-fi, but this is a really cool series about people in space fighting with other people in space, and there's like artificial intelligence, and there's alien virus things. It's crazy, and it's told all throughout documents and emails and text messages and different scripts and pictures and diagrams, and it's really, 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 really cool. The main issue I have with the sequel is that it's a companion series, and I was like, why? So we had to get an all new cast of characters, an all new ship, and I think the other main thing that was not good about this book is since I read an advanced copy of it, crucial diagrams and pictures were missing out of this because it wasn't finished. So like every other page it was like diagram to come, picture to come. I couldn't even understand some of the book because these things were missing from it. So hopefully if I reread a finished copy of it, I'll be able to get more enjoyment out of it. But this one was really good. Again, if you liked Illuminae, you'll like this one as well. Nothing changed. It was still entertaining and fun and fast, even though it's like 600 pages. I will always be astounded by the way that these 2 authors can write so like perfect teenage lingo. Like it's not cheesy the way that you think it would be. It's hilarious. But I did like it. I gave it 4 stars. Maybe I'll reread a finished copy and give it 5 stars. The next book I read was sent to me by Penguin Teen for review. I love me my Penguin Teen. They're here for me. It was A Torch Against the Night by Sabaa Tahir. This book, I really enjoyed the first book. An Ember in the Ashes was like one of my favorite books of last year. And it's like a Rome retelling is what the world is, and I forgot the plot of book 1 because all I can think about is book 2. But I think this series kind of goes down the drain a little bit. I did not enjoy book 2 nearly as much as I enjoyed book 1. Book 2's writing just seemed very simple in comparison to book 1. The characters just sort of dropped off and were bland. There was nothing I particularly enjoyed about this book. I was skimming some parts of it. I'm upset. I listened to this one on audio just to get myself through it, and I thought that was really good. So if you like audiobooks, this is great on audiobook, but I ended up only giving this book 3 stars. I don't know if I'm going to continue the series, and I am disappointed because I thought this one would be really good, and it was just kind of meh. However, I will say the plot twists in it are great because I was not expecting any of that. Still though, 3 stars. Now here's when school began and I had to read a book a week for my English class. So half these books are just books I had to read for English, which sorry if you get bored. So the next book I read for English was Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. This book takes place in Africa in a clan, and it talks about this guy who's a warrior. I already forgot. I wrote an essay about this and then everything left my mind. It's about colonialism in Africa and how they deal with that, and I thought it was really good. It was was just really simple to read. Nothing really struck me as amazing about it, but it was still really fast and it had interesting class discussion. I gave it 4 stars, even though I probably could round it down to like 3 or 3.5 stars now that I've actually been able to sit back and think about it. The next book I read I took home for a weekend and finished it in like 12 hours. It was Ugly Love by Colleen Hoover. This book follows a girl. She moves in with her brother, and her brother's neighbor and her, I forgot the plot, but I just know that the love story is between like the neighbor and her. I didn't like this book. If you've been here for a while, you know that I do not like Colleen Hoover. I just read her stuff because I can't help it. It's addicting. Kill me. So this book was just all sorts of a mess. I feel like Colleen Hoover continually tries to write books that are about like mental illness or really harsh topics, and she doesn't know what she's talking about. She doesn't know how to handle character emotions. This book was so unrealistic and so bizarre. There were 3 things that went horribly wrong in this book. First, the blatant sexism and the gender stereotypes perpetuated on every single page. Second, the main character had absolutely no self-respect. Third, the way that this book is told is that you're in the girl's perspective, meeting this guy. He has such a tragic backstory. The story revolves around him. Like, everything that's bad and everything that goes wrong is like based on his life. Hold on. I need the focus on me, not my bookshelf. I know they're prettier than me, but this is Whitney time. And I feel like if you're gonna write a book that's about this guy that's so torn and has so many problems, that's all the plot is contingent on, is this person who is so flawed and you have to find out more about him and his backstory is so sad. Why then do we have to make the book about this main character who has like no personality? She is so like, literally is a doormat for the entire book for him to walk all over. And but why does the story revolve around her instead of the person who's actually going through the inner conflict? Why? Why? It was just so frustrating, this book. I hated it. I don't like I gave it 1 star. I would not recommend it. It was worse than hopeless. And I thought nothing could get worse than hopeless. Okay, next book I read was also for class, and it was July's People by Nadine Gordimer. This book is set in South Africa, and it follows a white family who has to move away from their home in Johannesburg whenever there's attacks after the end of apartheid, and they're staying with their servant and the servant's family in rural Africa. It talks about race relations and white privilege and hypocrisy. I thought this one was really, really hard to read. I talk about this more in my Diversathon wrap-up, so I'll link that there. Was not a fan. It was hard to read. It was boring, and I gave it 2 stars. Another book I read for Diversathon, again, I'll just link my wrap-up for that, but it was Golden Boy by Abigail Tartellin. This was so good. It's one of my new favorites of the year, and I need everyone to read it. It's about a boy named Max who is intersex. He's like the popular kid in his school, but he has this really grueling inner conflict going on about gender. Can we stop focusing on the bookshelf? Thank you. I thought this book was magnificent. It's a masterpiece. It made me think so much. I just want everyone to read it and to realize the things that people have to go through on a daily basis that we don't even consider. I adored this book. It was so emotional. I was up until like 3 a.m. reading it and crying and telling my friends about it and reading it out loud. Everyone needs to read it, and I'm gonna be that spokesperson for it. It's so good. 5 stars. 5 stars. And the last book I read this month was also for Diversathon, but I didn't get to mention fully my final thoughts about it since Diversathon ended before I finished it. This book is Disgrace by J.M. Coetzee. This book follows a man in South Africa, and it's about how he gets fired from his job after he rapes one of his students and having to deal with the aftermath of that. This is a very character-driven based because he has a lot of inner conflict, and he's a very twisted character. He doesn't see the rapes that he does as a bad thing, and so it's a very frustrating narrative of being inside this guy's head and seeing where he's coming from and having to sort through things while he's living with his daughter. It's hard to read at some points, not because it deals, well yeah, because it deals with that hard topic, but just because he's such an ignorant person, and the feminist inside me was like, whoo, boy! Class discussion for that was interesting. I really enjoyed this book though. I thought it was well written. It's a hard topic to read about, but it was so important, and the way that I could analyze this, I tried to write an essay that was 3 pages, but it ended up being 6 pages. I had so much to say about this. It was very impactful. Again, one of my favorites of the year. I literally thanked my English teacher for making us read this because I really enjoyed it. I'm gonna go buy my own copy of it, and I think that you would like this. Again, trigger warning for rape if that's gonna be something that's startling for you. Also, probably should mention trigger warning for Golden Boy, which I just talked about. So that was everything that I read. I'm sorry this video was so long. Inevitably, all my wrap-ups are like 30,000 minutes long. If you read any of these books, let me know how you liked them. Until next time, hope you're having a wonderful life, and I promise there will be some sort of regularity to my wrap-ups in the future rather than just this mess. Okay, goodbye.